grab your favorite beverage, kick up your feet as you ascend with me into the joy portal of soul reflections, fresh perspectives, fun ideas, and wisdom. Light to light and heart to heart. Smile and breathe even deeper as together we will soar above the perception of all hurdles and shine brightly as the light we are. Namaste and welcome to Light, Laughter, and Lattes. My name is Geri Habstritt. I'm an evasive quantum healer, Self-Ascension intuitive counselor, medical intuitive, and your friend and soul connection for the next hour. Today I am pleased and excited to have with me Kathleen Karlsen, who is a musician, writer, speaker, and artist. She has 2 books. One titled Flower Symbols, The Language of Love, and her newest book, Vocal Medicine, Transformation Through Sound. She also does workshops and is a speaker, and she works in my favorite topic, which is transformation and healing the human body and the human psyche through music and color. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you. Very, very happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about, I guess I like to go back to childhood on these things. You have such an amazing creative and musical and healing background. Artists and people like you usually have a bit of a different childhood or a different upbringing or something along the way that just made you feel maybe a little bit different than everyone else. Is that true for you?
Yes. Yes, I grew up in the Air Force. I was a military brat. My father was career military. And we had an experience as a family. When I was 6 years old, he was in a full-speed plane crash. So that was a huge impact in my life. He was a test pilot for F-4 planes, and there was a mechanical failure, and the plane crashed at 645 miles an hour. So that was like a huge shift in sort of the trajectory, of all of our lives. And what I would say about growing up in the military, watching my father recover from that accident, which took him 9 months in a body cast and 3 years of full-time physical therapy and surgery, multiple surgeries. So as a little kid, seeing that, what I gained, which was incredible, as someone who is very artistic and very musical, is I saw this example of supreme discipline in him. So for me, that has served me extremely well because I think a lot of people who are in the healing world and in the world of music and art, have a more difficult time with sort of grounding things and, really being disciplined about practicing or disciplined about writing or disciplined about whatever they're doing. So that was a great, great blessing in my childhood. And it was also a challenge. We were raised very, very strictly. You did not cross the line. So that was good. Kept me out of trouble for a long, long time. But so that was a significant event in my childhood. My parents encouraged me a lot with art and music. They did not think I was going to make a career of it. They just thought that it was a wonderful self-expression. My mother was very much into yoga. She was way ahead of her time and put me into yoga classes when I was a little kid. So I got both of those things. I got the military and the discipline from my father, and I got the spirituality and the creativity from my mother. So it was a good combination.
Yeah, it sounds like you grew up in some nice balance. You've got the left brain and the right brain nurturing you from both sides.
Yeah, that was good. And go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, for me, the spirituality really came in when I was a teenager. I was very interested. I was studying from the time I was a little kid, anything that I could find about healing. And anything that I could find that was extraordinary. I was already looking for some reality outside of normal reality at, 8 or 9 years old. So I read tons and tons of science fiction and books about ghosts and anything about other dimensions. And then went through a very difficult period in my teenage years. I had been raised Catholic, but I was in a situation with a priest where I was in a sexual abuse situation at young teenager, 14, 15. And that also had a huge impact. So I've had these major events that have happened. And what happened with that was that I decided that I was going to go and I was going to look for a different God. It was like I had to decide at that point, was I going to become an atheist because of the traumatic experience that I've been through, or was I going to find another God? And I decided that I was going to look elsewhere. So I started on a very intense spiritual path at, 15, 16 years old, and was going to conferences. Edgar Casey, was exploring meditation, was doing all that kind of stuff. So that was another, very dramatic event, but in the end had a really positive effect because I was just absolutely determined that there was another God, that there was another way to be, that there was another source or another way to connect with spirituality. So it just set me on that path very young.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it seems as though the best way to learn or to go through a major life shift in consciousness is through some sort of pain.
Yes.
So it is just so...
It's an incredible catalyst.
Yeah, it's just so common. Almost everyone I've talked to has had something, a death or an accident or something that has completely shifted them.
Totally. And, and I also looked around during my teenage years and I saw that, because those are difficult years, I would see friends and people who hung out at my house. I was one of 4 children that were all in high school at the same time. We were very close in age. So we had the entire gamut of, star athletes and drug dealers, literally, all kinds of different people that would gather at our home, and everybody was welcome. Everybody's friends were welcome. So what I saw was that even the kids who were really getting into serious trouble, and some of them ended up in jail, mental institutions, all kinds of things, that they weren't bad kids. And I think when I saw that, I decided that I wasn't just going to go into the healing field because I had planned to be a doctor and planned to go to medical school. Because what I saw was that there was a healing that needed to happen that was deeper than something physical, and as a doctor, you can heal a disease, you can set a bone, but there was something at the soul level that I saw around me that was missing or that was off kilter or something. And so at that point, I decided that I would devote my life to spirituality and that healing would come as the result of that. So almost like putting your path first and your soul first. And then if the body heals, that's like a side effect. That's a blessing. But what you're really working with is the soul. You're really healing the spirit and the heart.
Yes, absolutely. I had that same knowing at a young age that transformation came within, and that there was definitely something deeper to the healing than what was being presented in the medical world, for sure.
Yeah.
So as you moved on, so when did the musical part of you and the art part of you really kick in to the point where you knew that this was not just maybe a hobby, but this was your gift to the world?
Well, I went, when I was in college, I decided that I was going to take a break and I was going to go and explore something else. So I literally ended up living in a Quaker community in New England. So at that point, I was deciding that I wasn't going to go to medical school. I wasn't going to be a doctor. And one of the few things that I found great comfort in was art and music. So I had always done art and music. I took piano as a child. I took art classes, all through high school. And I really loved it, but it wasn't until a little partway through college that I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I became an art major. and then took a lot of music classes supporting that. And went from there. I lived in 3 different spiritual communities, went to a Sufi community for a short period of time, lived in a New Age community for almost 10 years. And during that time, I really deeply felt that I was serving God and that I was trying to join with other people. You know, I think one of the things that I found was that the issues that we have in the world are bigger than one person can deal with. So there was part of me that was also looking for my people, you know. So I met incredible people and wonderful people, you know, in all of those situations. And as my children started to grow up, so I met my husband in one of the spiritual communities that I lived in, and we're still married today, you know, 30 years later. We have 5 children. So there were many years when I was very, very busy earning a living and taking care of the children. And then a few years ago, I had another experience where I had a multiple rollover car crash at 60 miles an hour. And I really felt like, you know, it was that strange space when you know your car is out of control. And I hope that listeners haven't had this experience, but there is this space that you get into, and it's like I hit black ice, and then I went off the road. This was a mountain pass near my home here in Bozeman, and I knew there was nothing I could do. And it was like this space of, well, I'm just going to wait until the car stops, and then I'll find out if I'm alive or not. And when the car stopped, I realized that, wow, if there's such a thing as a death gate, like I just passed through one, and I've just started a new life. And it took me several months to process that whole thing and realize. And from that point, it was like, I know that I have responsibilities to my children, to my family, but I have to pursue this full time. I have to do this with everything that I have. So that was about 3.5 years ago. And I have just been doing, I think in the last 2.5 years, I've done well over 100 Kirtan events. So it just really put myself into it in a new way. So I'd known my whole life from my teenage years that healing with art and music was my path. But I think there were just a lot of other things that I had to do. You know, you have circumstances, and I feel like now I'm at the starting gate. Like, you know, everything until now was preparation, and now I'm ready to launch into decades and decades ahead, hopefully, of having art, sacred art and sacred music be my entire life.
Well, here, I'm feeling the same as you. I feel like I'm just getting going at age 53. When some people are thinking about unwinding, I'm thinking about just starting up.
Exactly. At the starting gate, just the bell rang. Time to go. Yeah, life begins at 50, I swear. That is.
Well, I actually was on your website, which, oh my goodness, when we get closer to the end, I'm going to have you share all that. But you do so many wonderful things. And actually, I read about the Death Gate because that's one of the first things that drew me out. Those are incidents that are usually so profound and always life-changing. And there are always some path that the soul has laid out so that you can come ever closer to the truth of who you are. And one of the things I thought that was fascinating is you talked about the car experience. You also mentioned when you got back home, everything changed for you. Your friends changed, paths that you thought were laid out before you disappeared. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that was a huge upheaval. You know, during probably the 6 to 8 months after that car accident, you know, I came home and I started spending all of my time chanting. And I started going out in nature and hiking a lot. And I started every week, I would try to connect with new people because I had lived a fairly insular life. You know, I mean, I'd been in the military, so living on military bases, which is a certain kind of community. And then in spiritual communities, which were also isolated in their own ways, you know, like a protected kind of place. And then raising 5 children and running a business, I feel like I don't necessarily need to go and live in a cave in the Himalayas for 30 years because I spent decades, 2.5 decades, living in my basement, homeschooling my children with a very small circle of friends. And it was like, okay, it's time to come out of the cave. It's time, it's really time to go. And, it does upset people in your world when you start to be very different and you start to change. And I'm like, so here's this lady that, was in her basement for decades, and I was painting all the time and I was teaching piano. So I was in touch with the art and music, but I'm like, singing, in Sanskrit in yoga studios, and, and it was just very different. And I was, out and meeting people and getting interviewed by the newspaper and, putting up videos and doing the whole thing. And it was a huge change. It was a major issue in my marriage, simply because when you're going forward and one person thinks, well, we've run a successful business, we've almost raised our children, now it's time to garden and drink wine. And the other person says, okay, now I'm ready to go and chant in all the sacred places in the world. Come with me or don't, So, so that was a big deal. And it took us a good 6 months or more to really work that out and to say, of course, when one person has gone through a dramatic experience like the car accident and the other person hasn't, it's hard to comprehend what's going on. And I kept trying to remind my husband. He was like, what are you doing? Who are you? Kind of thing. And I would be, you don't understand. I started a new life. I started a new life without having to be reborn and go through the whole thing again. And I have great gratitude and respect for that. And I have to absolutely make the most of the life that I have now.
Yeah. Well, no, you actually were reborn. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's tough when that happens because everyone around you expects you to continue to play the role that you've always played. And when you change your role, it's uncomfortable for everyone. So, a lot of people on the spiritual path as they move forward tend to move through friends.
Yeah. I have, and it's wonderful to have, the small circle of friends that I had before. I still have them, but now I have all kinds of other people in my world. And, so sometimes those worlds mix well and sometimes they don't. And, it's actually been a very good thing now. I would say that my marriage, for example, is stronger now and happier than it's ever been. Because it's hard to have a very close relationship with someone if you're not being the fullness of who you are. So it's like you have to risk doing that, and then you see how that's going to work for everybody, or if it is going to work for everybody around you. So fortunately, at this point, my closest relationships have remained intact. But yes, there has been a lot of shifting in, the circles that are a little further out.
Well, I have to ask you, because I read a little bit about, so you have this book that you wrote about vocal medicine, and you talked a bit about, it started with a thyroid issue. Is that correct with you?
That was one of the things that was, on the healing level, that was the first thing that had happened, because I'd been in this situation where I had really not spoken up for myself, not dealt with some of the trauma that had happened earlier in my life. And chanting was an incredible catalyst. Like all of those emotions, they were stuck in my throat, like things that I hadn't said, ways that I hadn't protected myself or defended myself or whatever. So what I found when I was chanting is that it was a way to bring all of that to the surface and start to work with it. And because I wanted to chant so much, I was willing to do that. And I would do simple things like, I hadn't, especially if you've been in a situation where there has been some kind of betrayal or sexual abuse or that kind of trauma, it's like learning to set your boundaries, is extremely important. So I would do things like just chant the word no. I could chant the word no for 45 minutes. And I would be totally high. Like when I chant, I have this feeling of like a full body buzz. And it's almost like the sound moving through you creates that. And there's something freeing and liberating about it. So it wasn't that I was chanting like against anyone. It was just that I was protecting myself. Like, no, I'm not going to be that person anymore. No, no, no. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. And this is the gift that I have to offer. And I must be in a position where I can offer that. So that was, the chanting was really a catalyst because I had tried healing my thyroid before and I hadn't been successful. I tried herbs and essential oils and I still use those things in that process. But it was like the X factor that shifted everything and allowed me to finally heal after, a couple decades on thyroid medication was the chanting, just sending all of that healing energy right through your thyroid because it's vibrating right there in your throat. So yes, that was probably the most powerful healing experience that I've had thus far with chanting.
Well, I'm curious too, because not only is the throat chakra, it's also known as the truth chakra. And besides speaking your truth, a huge aspect of it is living your truth. So I'm curious, after you had the car accident, you made this dramatic shift into the person you are now. Did you notice the shift in your throat about the same time?
Yes, it was going on in that same period. Yeah, through that, 6 to 8 months, it might have been an entire year, when I was working with that. And yeah, it was, I'm trying to think how else I could really describe it. It was almost like there was a block, like an energy block in my throat.
Sure.
And in order to sing, I had to clear that. Because when I first started chanting, I would get hoarse very quickly. So my throat would tire very quickly. And so I had to recognize, okay, I'm not going to be able to do this if I don't release this. So I was doing a lot of journaling. And I would sit down and it was like stream of consciousness, no holds barred, anything that I felt went into the journal and it would be very emotional, so if I couldn't chant because I just felt like crying instead, sometimes I would just cry for an hour and then sometimes I would just write in my journal for an hour. And there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of suppressed rage that I just had never dealt with. So all of that went into the journal. I didn't know that I knew as many swear words as went into that journal, but I would write it and I would write it and then I would burn it. And, and for me, that process was just like a very conscious recognition that, I'm doing everything I can to resolve these situations. And if some of them are, there isn't anyone or anything that I can work with, I can work within myself. So I would just write and write and write, and then I would burn it and I would, offer a prayer and ask, that all of this energy be transmuted because I recognize that in order to be a healer myself, which is sort of the fundamental, for me, it's like, my expression is through art and music. But the underlying idea is that this is a healing practice. So in order to be able to heal others, as much as possible, you'd like to be whole yourself so that there's, I think there's greater energy that flows through you when you're whole yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be. You don't have to be perfect. It doesn't mean that you're going to have perfect health or, perfect relationships or whatever. But to have the intention that the reason why I am creating wholeness for myself is so that I can offer it to others. And that seemed to bring me out of myself, especially with children. If you have time, I can tell you one other situation, because there have been a number of things in my life that kept pushing me back towards the art and the music and the healing aspect of that over and over and over again. And one of my children had a traumatic brain injury. He had a accident on a mountain bike. So he went off the handles, did not have a helmet on, hit his head, had a microbrain hemorrhage. And I became very involved. So this was even before the car accident. So I had become very involved in working with him. He had to drop out of school. I mean, he was really struggling hard. And it took a good year and a half, for him to recover. And so during that time, he had severe post-traumatic stress disorder. And he would be with me day and night, like he couldn't be, he was like a toddler emotionally at that point, afraid of everything, freaked out about everything. I mean, I would lay on his floor in his room for probably a good year and hold his hand so that he could fall asleep, that kind of stuff. So I started working with him and we did visualizations together. Fortunately, he was young enough that he was willing to let me take charge. A few years later, a teenager might not do that, but he did. And we started doing, I did some chanting with him. I did visualization. I did color healing with him. And finally, I did take him to a medical intuitive. And she said to me, well, you and he have a contract. And part of what he's going through is to pull you back into your mission, is to pull you back into healing with sound and healing with art and with music. So, there's just been multiple things, you will do for your child what you might not do for yourself. And I think, if you get to the point in life where it's like, okay, I could do this with my child, and now I can look at other people like that, like that desire to help heal. If that can be extended to others, then that was another thing that, really helped me tremendously to keep moving down this road.
So where along all of this did the idea for the book come?
Let's see. I think that was probably about 3 years ago. After running a multimedia business with my husband for years and starting to know the world of art, having been in the world of art, I had work in 5 different studios at one point, 5 different galleries. I knew that I had to find a way to make this practical. When people come for chanting, it's almost like to be able to give them something physical to take away is a blessing both ways. It helps them to connect. It helps them to understand if they want to go deeper into it. It helps them to understand what they just experienced. So, and for me, it's also a very practical thing because it's a way to create something tangible that I can offer to someone else so that there's a flow of energy and abundance and finances as well. So it's been a great opportunity with the vocal medicine to take that book and put all the things that I've studied. So I had offered workshops starting 3 winters ago, and I did a tremendous amount of research and would create extensive handouts for these workshops. And then I started thinking, well, why don't I just put them all into one book? And then people that come to one workshop, if they came to a workshop on goddess chants, but they're also interested in the primal sounds and the bija seed syllables, or they're interested in how art fits into this, sacred geometry, yantras, they could get the book, and now they've got all the information from the workshop that they just took, plus they have all this other information if they're interested in other areas. So it was working on a lot of levels, and so it was pretty recent. I started the research about 3 years ago, and then started the book probably about 8 months into teaching workshops. And then, it took me maybe a year and a half or so. So it was just published early this year, published at the end of February this year.
Okay. So was this part of the result of your son's accident?
Yeah, it all came together because I just realized that, this was something that, he went back into after he recovered. Then just around the time of the accident and of the time that I was getting into chanting and learning how to play the harmonium, and I went to Kirtan Leadership Institute that's in Boulder, Colorado, and took 3 different levels of training to understand, more about kirtan, more about chanting in a group. And he had sort of, when you've had a severe case of PTSD, it's common that it will recur at some level. So it was almost like he had recovered, and then there was this gap between when he had recovered, and I sort of went back to my life. I just went back to earning a living and taking care of all the kids and everything else. And then he cycled back into the PTSD right around the time that I'd had that accident. And it was like another calling. I realized because of my connection with him that I needed to get back to my mission because he and I were tied together. I mean, it sounds sort of strange, but it was almost like I recognized that it would be easier for him to be whole and go forward in life if I was fulfilling my end of the contract, if I had a contract with him. And that's why he had gone through that accident, at least in part. Was because of my contract with him, that if I didn't fulfill that contract, it was almost like I felt like I was putting him at risk. I was putting him at risk of cycling back into the stress and the disorder that he had been in. So it was coming at me from all these different directions. It was like there was just absolute clarity. I must do this.
Well, it makes me smile because our children are absolutely here for us. We think we're teaching them, but they're here to teach us. And so it's like he just kept calling you back. I'm calling you back. I'm calling you to your mission. If you forget, I'm going to call you back again. They're so good at that.
I know. And if I think too much about it, I'll just start crying because you think, here was this young boy who was willing to go through an incredible amount of trauma for my sake. And it's like, wow, how could I possibly turn back after recognizing, that, how that was working between me and him.
Yeah. No, our children sign up for these things for us.
Yes.
They do. It's just so amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are like halfway. We're at like the 30-minute mark. So we've got another 30 minutes. And I love kirtan. And so we could just start talking about the chants and giving people ideas about healing and go into some singing. Or we can use this as an opportunity to talk about the healing aspects of some things that you have in the book. I'll let you decide. Where would you like to go?
Okay. Well, why don't I talk a little bit about why a lot of chants are in Sanskrit? Because that is something that puts some people off. Like, it seems very complicated and very foreign, for someone to chant in Sanskrit. So let me start there. So okay. I do some chants in English, and I've done some in Hebrew and other languages that are considered liturgical languages or spiritual languages in one way or another. But the reason why Sanskrit is the fundamental for kirtan is that it's a language that is the mother tongue. So originally, Sanskrit is considered to be a language that was created out of onomatopoeia. So in other words, when you're trying to create a sound that is mimicking something in nature. So there's sounds that would correlate to electricity, sounds that would correlate to magnetism, sounds that would correlate to thunder or lightning and all those kind of things. And then it gets also into the feeling world, the sounds that are protection, sounds that are for expressing love and devotion, that kind of thing. So with Sanskrit, it's still very close to that. And a lot of our other languages have grown out of Sanskrit. So in the human body, there are 84 different meridians that end in the palate of the mouth, in the gums, the soft and the hard palate. So if you think about Chinese medicine, when you're putting a needle in, you're creating an energy conductor. So you're touching a point. So when we speak, our tongue is constantly touching the ends of these meridians that are in our mouth. And in some languages, because there's rolled R's in some languages and there's some letters and sounds in different languages that don't exist in others, each language is going to have a different physical stimulus as you speak it. So with Sanskrit, it's more closely aligned to those meridians. And when you say something over and over again, it's like you are connecting. So you're touching your tongue to a point. So say it's right behind your teeth, that ridge behind your front teeth. If you're touching your tongue there, and when you're chanting in Sanskrit, you're often repeating a phrase or a syllable over and over. So if you say something like namaha, you're saying the ah several times. So you're positioning your mouth and your tongue in the same way. So you can think of it like an internal massage for your body as a whole, because singing involves your whole body. And you can also think of it as like an acupressure, like the tongue touching those meridians. And then the final piece is that when you sing, you're resonating in your head, so in your skull. And there's a lot of, occult and metaphysical things around the shape of the human skull and, how sound resonates and, that whole dynamic. So you are sending sound into your brain, which is stimulating some of the organs that are associated with spiritual power. So, the pineal gland, pituitary gland, and those are often not utilized in our modern society and actually, like atrophy. So the sound, as you send the sound, and different sounds are more effective for different parts. So like E is it's a head tone, so it's like a third eye kind of sound. So when you sing, some sounds are more heart-based and more physical in the physical body. Other sounds are more for stimulating and sending that resonance sort of bouncing back and forth in the skull and stimulating the spiritual senses. So it's the chakras, it's the meridians, and the Sanskrit is very effective for that. More effective potentially than some other languages that you could sing in. So that's like the physical or medical or healing side of the Sanskrit piece.
Great. I love that. I've done some kirtan, and it is incredibly powerful. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's something that you can sit there for an hour chanting over and over and over the same line, and it never gets tiring for whatever reason.
Right.
And if you sang the same line over and over and over in a typical song, you would be bored to death after a minute.
Right. Yeah, there's something that happens. And the other thing is the whole group dynamic. So I sit at home, forever. But there's something different that happens. And there are studies being done now of the Sanskrit effect, which is what they're using, the term that's being used now to show how Sanskrit is stimulating different parts of the brain and potentially developing more parts of the brain than other languages might. But the other thing that happens is when you're in a group like that, because you're repeating the same phrases together, you tend to start breathing at the same time. So there's a synchronization that happens. Your heart rate actually starts to synchronize with other people in the room. Your brain chemistry is affected. So you start to release dopamine and oxytocin, which is like the bonding chemical. Usually thought of between a mother and a newborn child, but it's also a chemical that is released when you're bonding with other adults, and decreases cortisol. So there's this, your brain is getting washed with these great chemicals, and the chemicals that create stress are being reduced, and you're with all these people singing, and you're synchronized with these other people. So it's a great antidote in our society for isolation, for anxiety, for depression, for our sense of separation from other people. And because everybody's singing, and it's usually very simple phrases and very simple melodies, people don't feel like they're performing. So, your voice is blending with the other people around you. And it's just a very unique and very harmonizing and healing experience on so many levels that I just love it.
I agree. How about if you pick something that you would like to sing and share with us all what it is, what part of the body that that it's for.
Okay, sure. So let's see. Here's a very simple one. This is Sitaram. And this brings up the whole idea that when the ancient rishis were meditating for thousands of years in caves and came up with some of these original chants, not the melody, but oftentimes the phrase that is used, the mantra, is a formula. So what is believed by some experts is that these formulas were mnemonic devices. So you can think of it as you're chanting to a certain goddess or to a certain god or, to a certain power. But there's also the fact that we love to personify things, and it helps us so much to be able to remember things, to have a story around it. But this is Sita Ram. So Sita and Ram are the hero and the heroine of the Ramayana. And Sita is female, and then Ram is male. And the words are Sita Ram, Jai Jai Ram. So all that means is victory to Sita and Ram, and victory to Ram. So Jai is like victory, it's like hail, it can be used as a greeting, and it's a joyful kind of word. And if you look at it at the other level, the C has the vowel sound of E. So the vowels are what are carrying the energy. And then the consonants that are around the vowels are creating a container. So you don't want to just pour out the energy without having a container, or you're not going to get the maximum effect. So it's sort of, the vowels are thought of as feminine and the consonants are thought of as masculine. So Sitaram, so C is a very intense and focused kind of vowel. And then Ta is the relaxation. So if you wanted to think of it as the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, it's like the yang energy and then the yin energy. So Si Ta. And just that back and forth is like going back and forth from the yin and yang energy. So you're creating the outward and then the inward, just in that single word. And then Ram is the heart-centered. So it's Rum. If you take that word and you pronounce it as Rum, then you're at the solar plexus energy. But if you say it as Ram, then you have the Ah, which is the sound of the heart. So a very simple melody for this. Let me know if you can still hear me over the harmonium. The harmonium can be sort of loud.
I can.
So in a kirtan, what you would often do is call and response. So you would start with that first phrase, Sitaram, Jai Jai Ram, Sitaram, Jai Jai Ram. And then everyone would sing the next line all together. And then you go to the next phrase. So it's like a follow the leader kind of thing. And that also is creating like an energy flow back and forth, between whoever is the leader. And sometimes there's response leaders as well. So, there's someone that's singing with the audience, and sometimes there's not. So, but it's that flow back and forth. It's not. I really enjoy it because it's building on an ancient tradition, which is sort of the oral transmission of knowledge, or the whole call and response thing has been in many, many different traditions and religions. So, growing up Catholic, it was like, the priest says, Lord have mercy, and then everybody else says, Lord have mercy. So, so it's the same kind of idea, but it's a little more on an equal level. Like I offer something to you, and then you respond back to me. And then the other thing that happens, like even with a simple chant like this, is it might start really slow. And then as it goes, oftentimes the pace will pick up. So by the time this chant is played, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes even, 20 minutes, then the pace would be picked up. So it would be Sitaram, Jai Jai Ram. And that's also part, if you think of it starting as like a wide spiral, that then as it speeds up, the spiral gets tighter, and you can think of it as the energy is moving up. So, so you're drawing the Kundalini energy upwards with the increase in the speed of the chant.
Oh, I love that. I've never considered all the details of what was happening. I just knew that I loved it. But it's fun to hear in words what's actually going on when you sing these songs. Do you have another chant you would like to share?
Sure, let's see. Okay, so this one is for the lungs, Hamsa. And Hamsa has meaning on multiple levels. So hum is like the inhalation, and then sa is the exhalation. And of course you're not breathing that way while you're trying to sing. You're breathing and then you're chanting the words. But it does get you into a rhythm, and it's a great device. So you could chant. Some people will chant out loud, and then they'll get softer, and then they'll keep the chant going in their mind as a way to regulate their breath, for example. So it can be used as an aid for meditation as well as a physical chant. So this one. So just a very simple chant that, would be very beneficial for the lungs. It also, the word Hamsa means swan. So it's also used as a title of respect. Like, if you think about Paramhamsa Yogananda, for example, his name is not spelled exactly the same, but it's derived from that. So it's a title of respect. Someone who is the highest swan is someone with a great amount of attainment. So it's a beautiful word. So that chant is just one single word. Then there's another one that is a little more the Kirtan style. So this one is great fun because it's very simple. Again, this is just two words. So Jai Shambo. So Jai again means greetings, victory, great to see you kind of thing. And then Shambo is a very gentle form of Shiva. So Shiva is akin to the Holy Spirit in the Christian Trinity. So the Eastern Trinity is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So Brahma is the creator God, and then Vishnu is the preserver, and then Shiva is often viewed as the destroyer. So that can be very intense. So if you do a lot of chants to Shiva, it can be a bit of an upheaval in your world. But Shambo is a softer form of Shiva. So Shambo is more like instead of instead of the chant meaning, Shiva, destroy all evil in me, and if we have, that could be a major change, for most of us. But Shambo is more like Shiva, dissolve all that is unreal about me. So it's, a very soft, beautiful kind of concept. And this one, goes back and forth. It's very much the follow the leader kind of thing. So I would start out singing, Jai Shambo, Jai Shambo, and then everybody else would answer back, Jai Shambo, Jai Shambo, and then I would change it up a little bit, Jai Shambo. So then that one's very playful. So that would go back and forth, and you don't have to have words in front of you. You don't have to have lyrics for that. It's just listen. You just listen and then you respond, and you get it right or you don't get it right, and it doesn't even matter. But it's just a fun exercise like that. So that one can also be done very fast, in a very energetic, Jai Shambo, Jai Shambo, Jai Shambo, Jai Shambo. And it's great fun. It's a perfect one for people to play a tambourine along with, or to play shakers or drums. In the band that I have that I play a lot of kirtan events with, we have a tabla player, which is the Eastern drums. There's 2 drums that sit on the floor, and they're very tonal. So there's, you can tune them, very, very interesting concept. And then my husband plays udu drum, which is an African drum. It looks like a big gourd, has a very soft slap kind of sound. And he also plays recorder and sings. Then I have a kartal player. So kartals are like those little tiny cymbals where you have a pair. They're finger cymbals, and those are possibly the oldest instrument known to man. So they are anything that you can hold in 2 hands and hit together, So Mahima Geri plays kartals, and she sings. And then we have a bass player, electric bass, and guitarist. And of course, bass and guitar are not traditional Indian instruments, so that's a little more the Western kirtan style. So when we play then, you can also, everyone can be singing something that's very simple and very steady, like the Jai Shambo, and then the instruments can sort of come and go. There can be a recorder, and that fades out, and then, so it becomes a little bit more like jazz music. So a little bit of improvisation and a little bit of that in the moment kind of energy with it, which is great fun too.
Beautiful. And where can people go to find you and to find information on all the wonderful stuff you do?
So I have a website, KathleenKarlsen.com. So Kathleen with a K, and then Karlsen. And I have information about my music, speaking, and art and writing there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathleen. This is so much fun. Music is right next to my heart, always and all things. So this was great fun to have you on the show and to have you play live for all of us.
Wonderful to talk to you. Thank you for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
Yes, have a great day, and goodbye, everyone. Until next week, namaste.
Oneness Talk Radio. Hip, fresh, fun. Tune in to an honest portal of positivity 24/7. Experience unique talk radio from all around the planet, perfectly mixed with music that enchants your soul. Discover oneness moments as you relax into 3 to 5 minutes of divine inspiration. Claim your oneness today. OneNessTalkRadio.com. One world, one voice. Expand your vision.